Today we're going to talk about the Bloblobber. I can't even say it. Today we're going to talk about the Bloblobber in SalmonRun. In this series I break down weapons and how to use them in SalmonRun. The videos are short and they don't cover absolutely everything about a weapon. I just aim to make you feel a little bit more knowledgeable when playing SalmonRun. Number 1. The Bloblobber is a middleweight slosher that has the unique ability to bounce its shots off of walls and surfaces. Though not as fast as other sloshers, it boasts impressive range, great damage, and the ability to hit enemies from unconventional angles. Number 2. Each bubble, or blob, from a Bloblobber deals 60 damage. If you hit all your shots, that adds up to 240 damage per swing. If you're able to concentrate multiple full shots on enemies, you can rack up damage really quickly, making the Bloblobber a surprising hard hitter. The blob's damage are also not affected by how long they've been in the air or how far they've travelled before they hit a target. The damage is always 60 per blob. What does change with distance travelled is the size of the blobs. The further they travel or the more surfaces they hit will result in the blobs becoming smaller, meaning they'll ink less. With the blob, you can ricochet shots off of walls or other objects that don't take damage. This is unique to the Bloblobber and allows you to hit enemies in unconventional ways. I'll discuss this more in depth later in the video. I don't want to get too much into the technicalities of the weapon, but there is some variation in the way the 4 blobs work, with the first blob being slightly separate from the 3 that follow. There is also slight variation in the way they paint and how they bounce. The time between consecutive swings is 32 frames, and ink will start recovering 40 frames after the last shot has passed. It's also slightly faster to fire from humanoid form instead of being in swim form. Its ink tank is average. You get about 16 swings per full ink tank and about 5 after throwing a bomb. Bombs don't penalise the user too much, but it might be worthwhile to remember that the overall DPS of the Bloblobber is more effective than splat bombs for most situations, so only use bombs when they're needed. With the Bloblobber, you shouldn't underestimate its complete range. I think this is one of the things that newer or less experienced players forget. The Bloblobber has more range than you may realise, which makes it excellent for offensive or defensive playstyles, allowing seamless switches between both in SalmonRun. Number 3. The Bloblobber covers most bosses relatively well with few difficulties. Because of its overall DPS and power, it has the ability to shred bosses that have higher HP. Big shots and drizzlers can be managed well and should be something to keep an eye on. If nothing else, don't underestimate the Bloblobber's ability to damage high HP bosses. This is also how you should use the blob during extra waves. The Bloblobber has almost no issues with the majority of bosses. Flyfish and Moors can prove annoying in large quantities as they don't utilise the Bloblobber in its most effective way. Bomb spam with the weapon feels like you're kind of wasting the potential of it. It can manage the task because its ink tank is okay, however, like mentioned before, unless bombs are absolutely needed, the main weapon is more powerful. Steelheads and fish sticks can prove tricky to those not practiced with the weapon. I'll speak more about this in depth in the next point, but these bosses become easier when you're able to arc and swing your shots. For steelheads, it takes 2 shots to defeat it. For fish sticks, you can reach them from the ground if you jump and shoot or you have elevated ground. However, I find it easier to climb the stick and swing my shots so that instead of firing in a straight line, it fires from side to side. All sloshers benefit from this, but it becomes important with the blob as you won't likely see maximum potential unless you incorporate some level of arcing or swinging. And lastly, the Bloblobber manages lessers exceptionally well due to the range of the weapon and its multiple blobs. If you're using the Bloblobber in a comp that is otherwise quite weak against lessers, it may be worth switching objectives to help with multiple cohorts. Due to the way its shots fall and bounce, even just being able to damage lessers without fully killing them will go a long way in helping your teammates. Number 4. The way I would define the Bloblobber's role in a lot of comps is supportive. Even though it has the ability to be the primary slayer, it has a lot of utility in a supportive role, and I think for the majority of comps, you'll get the most out of the weapon by playing supportively. What do I mean by this? Well, I get that as a slosher, you may not find it as easy to power through bosses or run around the map like you can do with shooters and other faster weapons. Given that it's a semi-automatic, sometimes you might get stuck after firing or might find yourself overwhelmed if you're out of position. This is something that improves over time as you play more, but it's also something that can limit the weapon in its ability to safely protect itself or take the lead in most of the slaying. So for those reasons, if you're newer to the game or less experienced with the blob, you may find it more beneficial to support teammates with killing. Think of yourself as softening up enemies to help with the overall objectives rather than trying to be the player that can get the kill. You can also put out a lot of paint as a blob player, and given its range, you can ensure walls and paths are painted throughout waves. Talking about its range, you can take positions on maps you may not expect the blob can. As the blobs don't lose damage the longer they travel, you'll still have the ability to suppress lessers from far away and even take out bosses like stingers from safe positions. This gives the blob the unique ability to switch between offensive and defensive positions really easily. If you've ever played against an annoying Bloblobber player in PvP, then you'll understand there's sometimes wacky ways in which you can get hit by them when you weren't expecting it. Kind of works the same way in SalmonRun. If you notice the wave taking a turn for the worse, you can switch positions and start suppressing enemies from much further away, or you can take safer positions, such as higher platforms, to concentrate on clearing an area. I think with time and practice you can fully use this weapon in an aggressive way and be at the front clearing enemies without issue, but if you struggle with the weapon, then you'll still be able to be effective from a supportive role. Number 5. Like all other sloshers, the Bloblobber has the ability to hit shots from angles that other classes of weapons can't, more specifically above enemies and over them. Unlike all other weapons, however, is the blob's ability to have its shots bounce on the ground and walls, meaning you can ricochet shots. It might feel niche in a lot of situations, and realistically only some maps allow you to take full advantage of this, but it is absolutely something you should remember is possible. Niche or not, the fact that you can hit enemies from strange angles is something that keeps the Bloblobber unique and something you can take advantage of. Though the Bloblobber is a semi-automatic, its ability to spam shots from several different angles should be used wherever possible, either to paint walls or damage enemies. One of the most important techniques to get comfortable with when using the blob is to recognise when you need to swing or arc your shots versus just firing straight ahead. The sloshers feel like they have an exploit with this way of attacking, and not taking advantage of this feels like wasted opportunity. As mentioned before, the blob is a bit of an outlier as it has separate blobs that can bounce after landing, and this is different from a typical slosh from other buckets. But the idea is the same. You can arc your shots higher and over obstacles the way shooters can't. Though your shots don't pierce, the output the Bloblobber has in terms of its damage means that one slosh from it can usually hit multiple different enemies. Where this becomes notable is with bosses like Steelheads, Fish Sticks and Lessers. Steelheads need strict aiming to ensure you don't miss the cycle. Taking higher platforms may help you here if you struggle to aim whilst jumping. Fish Sticks can be easily managed if you swing your shots instead of just shooting forward, and Lessers can be hit from multiple different angles or different ways, either from underneath, above them, or just straight ahead. You'll notice this during Rush, as each chum has 50 HP, meaning you can defeat 4 of them with one slosh. I think a lot of times we determine how good a weapon is by its ability to defeat bosses, as opposed to being able to manage lessers or to help a little with everything. The blob can work in a lot of comps due to its ability to hit hard, but also because it can support teams through range, defensive play and splash damage. It may take a little practice to get how to use this weapon well, but once you do, you'll love the versatility of it and start experimenting with all the different ways you can help your team. I hope this video helps you appreciate the Bloblobber a little more. Let me know what you think. I'll see you guys soon. After the Blob Law was passed, I created the Bloblobber to lob lawful blob bombs. Oh, that sounds ridiculous. Read the whole story on my Bloblobber Blob Law blog. Oh, man, I can't even, I feel like I can just about say that, but it makes no sense. After the Blob Law was passed, I created the Bloblobber to lob lawful blob bombs. Read the whole story on my Bloblobber Blob Law blog. Oh, that's the best you're gonna get.